James and the Giant Peach is a popular children's book some of you may know. It was written in 1961 by British author Roald Dahl and made into an Academy Award-nominated film in 1996. This book reminded me of our reading from the Epistle of James today, which uses a number of images to illustrate just how damning and damaging, hurtful and harmful the way we speak to and about others can be. James talks about curses and blessings out of you and out of me, and how those can't go on in the kingdom. A spring doesn't gush fresh water one day and sewage water the next, does it? Apple trees don't bear strawberries, do they? And raspberry bushes don't bring forth apples. The fruit, though, that James is getting at, is the fruit that you and I bear, that we gift to the world. And that fruit is more than how we control our speech. That fruit is the very being and essence of our lives. And that reflects our faith, beloveds. But what about this giant peach? The main character in this great story, his name is James Henry Trotter, and he's a 4-year-old who lives with his loving parents by the sea in the south of England. Imagine that this fall day. A place where love and fruit were abundant and life-giving. That is, until his parents were killed by an escaped rhinoceros, and James is forced to live with his 2 cruel aunts, Spiker and Sponge. Now, his Aunt Spiker is a dominating and cruel, malicious and thoroughly despicable and repulsive woman. She's described as tall and thin, almost emaciated, with steel glasses. And her speech produces spit when she gets angry or excited. Auntie Sponge is just that. A greedy, selfish, and morbidly obese woman whose tongue and actions are equally as cruel and repulsive as her sister, Spiker. Poor James never hears his aunts laugh. Instead, they damn and curse him both verbally and by their treatment of him. For 3 years, he's the target of their fiery tongues, beaten for no reason, improperly fed, and forced to sleep on the floorboards up in the attic. But one summer afternoon, after some of this mistreatment, James stumbles across a strange old man who gives him the recipe of a magic potion, which when drunk, we're told, will bring him happiness and great and grand adventures. On his way back home, James spills the principal ingredients onto a barren peach tree, which then produces a single peach as large as a house. The aunts, of course, sell tickets to reap the rewards of this freakish fruit. And when night comes, the 2 aunts send James out to clean up, to pick up the trash that the crowds have left. And as he's doing this, he discovers a secret room inside the peach's seed, inhabited by a ragtag, human-sized bunch of talking critters, a grasshopper and a centipede, an earthworm, a spider, a ladybug, a silkworm, and a glowworm. They too were transformed by the magic he stumbled upon earlier. And they become his companions on his great adventure. As the centipede climbs up and bites the stem of the giant peach, it falls and crushes Auntie Spiker and Sponge and rolls through village and village before it falls off the cliffs at Dover on into the sea. And hours later, as they're sailing near the Azores, the peach is surrounded by sharks. And using the earthworm as bait, James and the others, they lure 500 seagulls to the peach from the nearby islands. And they tie these birds to the stem, and the peach is airborne and crosses across the Atlantic. In mid-flight, the centipede is entertaining the others with raucous songs about Auntie Sponge and Spiker. And in his excitement, he falls out of the peach into the ocean and has to be rescued by James. And that same night, thousands of feet in the air, the giant peach floats through mountain-like moonlit clouds where they discover the ghostly cloud men who control the weather. As the cloud men form hailstones and throw them down on the world below, the centipede insults them with as much of a fiery tongue as Aunties did to James. They also pour a tin of rainbow paint onto the centipede, briefly turning him into a statue before he is freed by a cloudburst and cleansing rains. Later, the giant peach smashes through an unfinished rainbow, and one of the cloud men almost boards the peach by climbing down one of those silken strings tied to the stem, which the centipede severs to release them. As they approach New York City, the military, the police, the fire and rescue services are all called and on high alert. The people in Manhattan flee to air raid shelters and into the subway stations, believing that the city itself will be destroyed. And a huge passenger jet flies by the giant peach, severing those silken strings connecting the seagulls to the peach, which drops and is then impaled on the tip of the Empire State Building. The people on the 86th floor at first think that these inhabitants in this giant peach are somehow monsters or extraterrestrials. And we're told that several of the police and firemen actually faint with terror. But James explains the story, and the people hail him and his friends as heroes. The remains of this giant peach are brought down to the streets, and they feed and are consumed by the children of the city. And the seed is moved into Central Park, where it serves as a mansion where James lives, while his friends create careers in the human world. And it's a place where James is said to have written this story. All right, Pastor Bill, you kind of went off the deep end today. But the imagery of James and the giant peach is fitting in this time of harvest. It's fitting in this week where we mark terror in Manhattan. It's fitting when we hear about children abused by words and deeds. But giant peaches and trees that bear multiple fruit don't exist. The Bible tells us so in James today. But in a truth is stranger than fiction twist, I stumbled across an article this week about Sam Van Aken, who is an art professor. Not an ag professor, not a botanist or a biologist. He's an art professor at Syracuse University who has been working on modifying plum trees so that each can bear not just one, but 40 different varieties of fruit. 40 is a good biblical number, even. And this might seem like it's the setting for a kid's book, like James and the Giant Peach, or the Giving Tree. But this is a real giving tree. Van Aken's developed this over several years, and it involves the grafting of buds from one various antique heirloom and native fruit tree to another, to a base tree that creates this one-of-a-kind hybrid. He talked about this in a recent TED Talk in Manhattan, of all places, how he takes a sliver off of one tree that includes a bud and inserts it into a life-size incision into the working tree, how he tapes it and then he lets it sit and heal all winter long. Then he prunes it back in the spring, and he hopes and prays that it grows. The result, a single tree bearing 40 varieties of fruit. Plums and apricots, cherries and nectarines, plums and, well, peaches, of course. But I wonder, given our readings, if he waters it with both clean and brackish water? I wonder if he speaks kindly to these saplings or scourges them with salty language like James' aunts. And I wonder if you and me, we the people who follow this Jesus the Christ, I wonder if we marvel more at the sciences or at the scriptures. In the midst of this field of wonder, in the very center of it is, of course, the tree, the only tree that matters, the real giving tree, the cross of Jesus the Christ, given out of the bounty of God's creation and transformed by human hands. It is rooted in the evil of empire, and it is both and, from God to be used for giving good, and transformed by art and science for enacting evil. James from the giant peach story, James from our second reading this day, and Jesus from the cross itself, call to us all, spikers and sponges alike, each one of us created in the very likeness of God, calls to us to stop our crushing cursing of individuals made in God's likeness and creation itself, and instead calls us into that field of wonder, to faithful lives filled with fruitful blessing.